Hello and welcome to another edition of the Harness Players Podcast. I'm Nahu Mikey P. Mike Pribozie, joined by one of my good friends, Mr. John Rallis, who works for Trot Magazine and is going to help me talk about some weekend races. John, welcome to the Harness Players Podcast.
Thanks for having me, Mike. Exciting times ahead. Obviously, a bit of a come down after Hambletonian. Unfortunate that you weren't able to participate live this year. Would have been nice to see you there. But exciting weekend then, and we've got a lot more to look forward to, and that's why we're here tonight.
Yeah, big weekend at Mohawk, big weekend at Pocono Downs, Sun Stakes at Pocono, eliminations for some 2-year-old trotters at Mohawk, John. And I know you've been hanging out there doing some TV.
Yeah, it's a pretty nice luxury to kind of be at multiple places at different times, but it's nice to be there when the action's happening, right? So I got to experience Meadowlands throughout the winter, and especially some of their marquee dates. And there's even more coming, looking ahead. But now is the Grand Circuit time for Mohawk. This is where it gets really busy the next 6 to 7 weekends. So it all starts this Saturday night, and I'm looking forward to it, and happy to be a part of it all.
So Peaceful Way eliminations this Saturday. That's 2-year-old filly trotters, and William Wellwood eliminations also. That's 2-year-old colt and gelding trotters, and usually the Wellwood winner ends up with a spot in the Mohawk Million.
Yeah, but actually they changed it this year now, so it's it's different format now. So the winner will not receive an automatic bid for the final. So things have changed. They've reduced the slot fees, obviously, for the Mohawk Million. I believe it was $100,000 a slot for 9 slots that you could purchase, and the Wellwood winner would get an automatic bid. This year, they've lowered it to $50,000 a slot. So a lot more slots were purchased in the offseason. But again, I'm sure that maybe the Wellwood winner already has a slot, whoever wins it, or maybe the Wellwood winner is going to try and work out a deal with somebody who does have a slot. But I would imagine that whoever wins this race is going to want to find themselves in that $1 million feature in a few weeks, or next month, I should say.
The Mohawk Million, it's been around for a couple years, and it's usually an interesting bunch for sure. It might not be the best of the best just because of the format and the fact that the guys have to buy in early to secure spots in that. But it's still always intriguing. They go for a lot of money. And last year, TCI was the winner of the Mohawk Million after making a break at the start.
Yeah, that was a remarkable finish. And, it's funny because I got a chance to speak to so many trainers and owners, especially being at Mohawk last summer. And a lot of them, some of them just said, I don't know if I can justify maybe spending the $100,000 because it's a lot of pressure, right? It doesn't matter if some owners or some barns have more success or not. It's hard to even make money in that event. There's a lot of pressure having to finish top 2. Now with the slot price going down, you're seeing a lot more interest, as we saw so far. They had to do a draw. They had to do a random draw to see which 10 slot holders ended up getting those spots. So I think the interest has certainly peaked. I think the concept is remarkable. I think now that they changed the dynamics in the slot, they cut it in half. I think you're going to see some of the marquee trotters participate, but that also depends on what kind of deals are made and what kind of trotters these slot owners have. But the lone $1 million race for a freshman trotter, so it's a great luxury.
Pretty amazing. We'll get to the Mohawk Million in a few weeks, but these are horses kind of making their way there. Maybe connections are pointing to that sort of later on goal. But 2-year-old filly trotters going in the Peaceful Way this weekend. We have a couple eliminations, John. Race number 3 is where it starts. They're going for 30,000 in these eliminations. They got 7 signed on here in race number 3. What was your thoughts here for this race Saturday?
I definitely thought this was the weaker of the 2 divisions. Personally, I think there's a couple other fillies who have really proven to be standouts. But I think what sticks out to me, obviously, is I think there's a lot of people who are going to be looking at the 2-horse Mona Lisa, specifically being Ontario side, right? She's actually she's done exceptional things so far this year. She's had a great provincial campaign and a good freshman campaign, no less. So I found this to be a little maybe the softer bunch overall on talent, but there's one horse who played the role of upsetter last time, Mike, in the Pure Ivory final, and that's Lasting Dream. Just a really, really strong effort there. She fended off a pretty tough filly in Southwood Milk. She draws well here as well. We know that when the zeros kind of add up for Luke Blais, or when you add an extra zero to the purse, Luke Blais and Determination do a great job getting these trotters ready. They have a program set for them. But Lasting Dream, I think, if she can replicate a similar performance, she looks like she's got a little bit more to offer. I thought that was a great effort last time out. I don't know how you see it, but I think she's the one to beat there.
My problem with her is that now the money's going to come, right? I mean, she's 15-1 last time in that Pure Ivory final, even with the connections that she had. And now she shows up here, and that price is going to be way lower. I mean, she's probably 2-1 or less in this race. And there's a couple shippers in here. I think Our Charm is very interesting. Had the 10-hole in the Sire Stake final. No chance whatsoever in that race. Prior to that, I mean, kicked 27-1 in one of the Sire Stake, one of the divisions back on July 19th to win. So this one's coming along. They ship up Toscano. McClure ends up here. So that's, I think, an interesting driver selection for this one. And I think Royal Mission is another one that's interesting, and that's another shipper. It's another out-of-towner here for Melander, and we know how his barn goes. I mean, this horse has made already almost $200,000 in those New York Sire Stakes, and was able to win last time on a half-mile track. Now, has some big track experience, raced pretty well on July 26th at Vernon, and ended up losing in that race, but always around it. I think getting better. This horse is very well bred. The fact that they ship up here is intriguing. And like you said, maybe a little bit lesser of the division here. I'm not really sold on the Ontario horses in this division. And they could, maybe make me look foolish here, but I don't know. I just, for Lasting Dream, the fact that you're going to have to eat such a low price, that's very concerning.
Yeah, but I do think I really liked what I've seen actually from her. It's funny that she was 15-1, but then when you really think about it, I don't think I realized just how much of an overlay she was, because realistically she was right there at the finish in the first leg of the Pure Ivory against Southwind Milk and Clarissa W, both who raced well, and Southwind Milk was what the 1-5, 1-9 shot in that final. So the discrepancy in price truthfully didn't really make sense if you really analyze how she performed at first asking versus Matthew Bax's filly. So I think she justifies getting bet here, because that was a really good effort. Even had the chance to catch up with James McDonald even the day after that Pure Ivory final. And, there were some people saying he should have taken her to the lead and whatnot. He still got to sit on Lasting Dream's back. She was never going by her. Lasting Dream was trotting really, really strong. She came home in 27 flat. I think it's hard not to like her in this spot. I get your point about you're going to lose value, right? You're not getting anywhere close to 15-1, but I think she's deserving of getting weight bet tonight, and I do think that she fits in well. For Royal Mission, she was just getting weak at the end of her mile, especially on a smaller track. I think that worries me here. With an outside draw, you're likely going to see an off-the-pace approach, and this is her first time on the big track. I do think that there are some question marks. We do see the one qualifier to Our Lady W. I mean, we haven't really seen great things from that filly so far this year, that she was able to finish runner-up in her lone qualifier, but I'm interested to see how she transitions here to the big track. And as for Our Charm, last time out 10-hole didn't really – I think you scratched that line out. I do think you're right to maybe give her consideration. She got things her own way too back, but and again, runner-up finisher to Kendra, who we've seen some good efforts from too. So I think if there's one of these U.S. shippers to really consider, I do think it's Archar, but I don't really want any part of Royal Mission. I respect the connections. It's just not a filly that I would expect is going to be deep enough for Stasking here on the big track.
Well, Elimination Racing and Royal Mission was, on the track at Vernon, raced pretty well on that track there. That's 7/8 there. So that's, what you'll see here. I don't know. I'm not too sold on the Ontario horses, and I could be wrong. And like I said, it is the Eliminations. You didn't mention the two much. Any thoughts on that one? Another one that's probably going to take quite a bit of money, and she's done very well up here.
Yeah, again, one of the couple Ontario sired horses that we have, Mona Lishi, she probably, there's a good chance she'd be 4 for 4 if not for making a miscue from the rail in her first start in that Tompkins Gears division. A lot of ones on her lines though, Mike, and she converted off a 2-hole trip, then she got things her own way in her second lifetime start in a gold, and then in the midseason final she does it the hard way, going first over. Didn't get away particularly well from the 2-hole. That might be the same thing, honestly, though, Mike, even here, right? She might not get away in a great spot, and like you said, Elimination Racing, top 5 make it. I'm not sure if it's a deeper group. maybe going first over. Who knows if she's going to be able to kind of withstand a trip like that, but she definitely belongs. And I think she's raced her way to being put in this race, right? The connections obviously think highly of her, and she's done nothing wrong so far this year, aside from making a miss her first start. So she definitely warrants a lot of respect in here. But again, this is tough competition now. I haven't been overly impressed with some of the Ontario side fillies to this point. I just don't know how deep the group is so far early on in their careers. But there are a couple fillies in here, specifically being Lasting Dream, that I think is ready to take that next step up. Southwind Milk was a filly that everybody said was a great filly, and Lasting Dream was able to get the best of her. So I think that's why you really got to think extremely high of Luke Blaze Charge in here.
Well, you speak of Southwind Milk. Let's go to race number 7, and Southwind Milk shows up here in the second division of the Peaceful Way. She's 2-1 morning line. She's been 1-9 pretty much every start so far. The first 3 were wins, and then she ended up losing that final when she was a little far back early and just couldn't quite catch. This is an interesting race because Champagne Problem shows up for Nancy Tactor coming out of that New Jersey Sire Stakes final win, where she was able to basically dominate again in 52-3. She looks very fast. So Southwind Milk going to get tested for class here.
Yeah, I think the way the race is going to line up, just by virtue, especially of the draws and how handy they are, I think they're going to line up 1-2 off the gate, Mike. But Champagne Problems, the most underrated mile on Hambo Day, right? Everybody was kind of in awe of Legendary Hanover going that 46 and change mile in the second race of the card. But then we see a 2-year-old trotting filly going in 52 and change on an off track that was graded 2 seconds. That was, to me, that mile was exceptional. What she was able to put forth early on in her career. We've seen her race 2 different ways early on, and she's proven that she could do it any which way. I think given her draw, given the short price that she's going to be, you have to think that she's going to be aggressively handled in here. The thing that really stands out to me, though, Mike, and I know we're going to touch on some of the Pocono stuff afterwards, though, but I think it might get a little bit dicey, though, with some of these drivers. I know Dex is listed, James is listed, and they push back. The race office had to push back these eliminations late because of the Pocono Stakes card starting at 2:30. There are some other events going on around the track that might hinder some of these guys even leaving the track right away. There might be a political rally of some sorts I was reading, but you might see different drivers pop up on some of these horses. I'm sure that some of these guys are going to get the drives back if they do make the finals in the event they don't show up. But I think that's definitely something to monitor. And there are a couple other marquee guys who are going to be out of town. So I think if you're playing based on who you drivers or whatnot, I think that's something to consider. But to me, Champagne Problems is the one to beat here. And Southwind Milk definitely warrants respect. But I can't go to anybody else other than them two. And to be honest, Nancy Tactor's filly is going to be a single for me in the sequence.
Yeah, I mean, it's just they just look head and shoulders above, right? And I think that Champagne Problems, no matter the situation, is probably going to control this race. And again, elimination racing, the fastest horse probably going to get the front and just dominate the race, and the others are going to be content to kind of, and I could be wrong, but they're going to be content to kind of sit back, maybe take a shot late, look to make the final, maybe draw better. This is, I don't think maybe the best race to bet, but a decent race to watch, because we'll see what Southwind Milk is right now. I think I would imagine that they're going to, yeah. I do think that they're going to try here for sure. Margaretta Hanover is another one that could be okay. Ships up for Melander. Only 2 starts, was favored first time out, and maybe just didn't race all that well, but caught a sloppy track on August 2nd there and was able to win and got it out a win there. So could be improving, and we know that this barn can get horses to improve. And this horse's breeding is very interesting. Also, if you look at the out of Maharaj, that's a Swedish breeding. So this horse is shipped over from over there. Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, we know what she is. So I would think that this horse, the upside is massive, and they're not taking it easy on her here. They're putting her right into the fire against horses like Champagne Problem. So I think that's intriguing. And this is a nice race, but I don't think you're going to get rich with the exacta here by any means.
No, I don't think so either. I'm really interested to see how Margaretta Hanover handles, the ship and against this company, though. This is obviously a tougher group that she's going to take on. I know those kindergarten races, there's some pretty talented trotters in there too, but this is this is much tougher here this evening. She hasn't had to take on the likes of the Champagne Problems yet. And Southland Milk, as you mentioned, is very good in, herself. That debut by Margareta Hanover, I thought was exceptional. The next start after, she did tie up in that race, but Dexter opted for Dominic Chechere, trainee Global Heritage. So interesting that Dex opted off in her third lifetime start, despite knowing that she tied up. So, if she races like she did on debut, Mike, it was a non-betting affair. That one, the first leg of the kindergarten, I do think that she really stacks up to be competitive here. I think that Champagne Problems early on in her career, she's shown that she's got a different gear now.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. Well, let's go and move on to the William Wellwood Eliminations. And this is 2-year-old open trotters. And this is the boys here. And shipper here that's probably going to be low on the board in the 7 Tactical Dynasty. Now, after making a break in that New Jersey Sire Stakes final, was unbelievable, actually. I mean, just to rally to be third from the spot, he was off the screen. I mean, he was basically nowhere to end up third in that race. And it was almost unbelievable. It was like, I remember watching the race and he was the 5 in the race. And I was like, is that the 5? Like ended up being third because he was because I bet the horse, and he was absolutely nowhere, and somehow find a way. Yannick got back, ended up coming up the inside, rallying to be third in the race. Obviously, tons of talent, but he has to stay on stride.
Yeah, he does. And this is a horse who, a colt I remember when I was working at the Meadowlands in his lifetime debut. Yannick did say that he was not higher than anybody. This was the colt that he was the highest on going into the season. So that's high praise for Yannick. He wanted to give him a target to chase in his career debut, which he did. And, he was just okay, but then you saw him just start to get a little bit stronger and stronger. So I think that second start out, even though he lost by a neck to Don't Ask for More, you kind of watch that race a little closer. When Yannick kind of gave him his cue and hit the bike a couple times and give him some whip tap urging, he legit just took off. Even after the wire, he looked so good trotting. So I really liked him too, Mike. I liked him in that New Jersey Sire Stakes final. I know it was a wide open group, but you have to like him off that break and the way he recovered late in the stretch. I know he got beat by a few lengths to Nordic Catcher, who we'll probably get to later. But a trotter, I think, obviously has to mind his manners, right? I mean, I think ideally you'd like to know maybe why he made that miscue. There's been a couple starts. If you watch him, it looked like Yannick's had to kind of steady him together. But it's early on in his career. I think pole 7 won't be a problem. It's just a matter of what kind of trip does he get, right? I think that there's some other horses here who might be, they've got post position advantages, right? Maryland, who we never touched on, that horse has raced really well. He didn't probably get the trip that many people anticipated he was going to get in that kindergarten leg on August 2nd, right? He got away 7th, and he closed really well to be 2nd, but just had no shot in that mile. 2 back, he looked like he was going to get a big piece of it, if not win, and he jumps it off. I'll give you one horse, though, Mike, that I think was really, really good if you watch the replay in that midseason gold, though. Look at Migo Amigo. We talked about Luke Blais trainees. Absolutely locked and loaded last time out. He left out aggressively from post number 10. I know he was 30-1, but this is a colt who I know he's got 1 win in 5 starts, but he's actually raced pretty well in some of these efforts. Just no shot in some of them. That's that's the best way to put it. Some of them by virtue of trip, by virtue of post, but he was aggressively handled for 150,000, and he never saw the light of day afterwards. So I know he's 10-1 morning line. I really do think he's a colt that you don't want to dismiss whatsoever. I think that there's more there than maybe we've seen early on in his career. And I think he's definitely worth the use in some pick 5 tickets and especially in some exotics as well.
Well, what's your thoughts on the 8 extended session? Obviously has been chalky and ended up making a break from the rail there, and that Millard Farms final 2-5 in that spot. Lots of talent here. Also has a 26-4 kickback on August 1st. There's lots to like here, but again, another one hard to trust.
He might be the overlay in this race because of the Tactical Dynasty in Maryland taking the support, right? I think people are going to gravitate towards the shippers. Extended session, I think after his first start, I think it was hard for some of these people not to think that this might be one of, if not the best 2-year-old trotter. I know it was his first start, but what he did in that start, Mike, not many trotters do. He was able to come back from, come off the pace and just make up an exceptional amount of ground. And the body language was just amazing for a horse making his lifetime debut. The qualifier was great, and you got 3-1 because of post 9. And I think there was some breeding on some other horses that people really liked being related to some other pretty talented trotters in there. But that horse just showed so much. And I think James probably shut him down halfway down the lane a couple starts back. I know he won by a head. We saw Cover Band coming pretty strong. It was a narrow victory, but I think that James had him pretty well in hand. I think you got to be a little bit concerned, though, off last week, just making breaks on the track in Parade. I don't know if you're watching the races live that night, but he never looked comfortable in Parade. And I had him singled on pick 5 tickets, Mike, and I wanted no part of him. Even before the gate, never looked comfortable whatsoever. Not sure if it was a soundness thing, but he was breaking all over the track. And as they lined up to the gate, never looked comfortable, and you could just see it in motion. He jumps it off stride. So I wonder what, again, it's top 5 make it, though. Is the priority going to be to just get him into that final, keep him trotting? I don't see James. We know he's got the early gate speed, but he showed that against a field that he's supposed to dominate 2 back. I think it gets a little bit tougher with this group. And I think, again, if we see a new driver pop up, it could get even more interesting here.
Well, the horse that won that race is the 3, Tegaron, by 5 lengths. And it's Robert Young's stable. We know that he's great with young horses. Scott Young driving. Was 11-1 in that spot. This horse has been steady so far in its 3 starts. Nice big breakout win last time. I think, interesting in this spot, considering that he's never shown a break. He's shown the ability to come late in miles, and some of these other ones have some question marks.
Yeah, and I think obviously you want to take the margin of victory with a little bit of a grain of salt. Though I know he did win by 5 lengths, but go ahead, make my day. It was debatable whether or not he was going to hang on for the win, but he did make a miscue, maybe almost halfway down the lane. And Scott Young's charge was coming pretty strong. I just don't know if he was going to get there 100%. To me, it looked like there was still a good chance he was going to win the race, but it wasn't going to be by 5 lengths. So those two kind of separated themselves from the field. We saw a few breakers in that Millard Farms final, but you touched on it. This is one of 2 Sons of Propulsion that Bob Young trains, and they've actually both done some really good things at the races early on in their career. So he's going to be I just have a tough time seeing this horse beating some of these other trotters. I think that some of these other freshmen right now have taken on some really, really nice rookies that we've seen so far. So I think it's probably a tough task for him. I think a lot of things worked out in his favor in that Millard Farms finals, but I won't take anything away from him. He still raced really, really well, but this is going to be a pretty steep, climbing class.
Doug Henwood, he's watching, and we mentioned Maryland earlier about Doug with his talent. I know John went over him, just saying that his ability to close here. John, maybe you can touch on him one more time.
Yeah, again, a trotter who had no shot last time out. If you watched that other leg of the third leg of the kindergarten series, he post 7, he got bet down, and he was just a victim of trip. Right, he's pretty handy enough to leave out of there. It was an off the pace trip. A few other rivals were leaving out of there, and he was coming off a break, so maybe Dex didn't want to kind of rush him out of there and try and risk him making a miscue once again. He finished up really well. He draws the best. I think I know he's 3-1 on the morning line. I still think there's a good chance he's going to go off as there could be a really strong chance he goes off as the race favorite, but Tactical Dynasty with that mile and 53-2 already in his career. I think that it's going to be either one of those 2, I think, but Maryland already shown versatility, and he's got a great draw to work with. Definitely one of the main players in here. So come Saturday, I don't know who's going to be my top selection just yet, but you have to respect the couple that we mentioned.
Race 10 is the other William Wellwood elimination, and we have a couple shippers in here. The most prominent being the 2 Nordic Catcher, who was a dominant winner of that New Jersey Sire Stakes final on Hambo Day. Just really had a wide trip and just mowed them down in the stretch. Really never looked a loser. John, is it as easy as him in this spot?
You know what? Off that effort, it's sick. It could be it. I wish that Emoticon Legacy didn't scratch sick in that Millard Farms final, Mike. That was a trotter I was really keen on watching. The second foal out of Emoticon Hanover, and we know how great she was, how great of a horse she was, and she produced a drawn impression. So here comes the second foal, and it's Emoticon Legacy, and I was so impressed by that debut. It doesn't trot the smoothest. You could see that there's a little bit, there's something there, but a horse who showed so much talent on debut, and I think that the breeding it's superstar level breeding, right? So you're seeing a trotter who has the makings to be a star, the same way we saw Drawn Impression. Things kind of went amiss for her a little bit with some soundness issues, with some sickness issues, but we know that she's one of the best trotters in her division. One right is Drawn Impression, and here's her sibling looking, to prove that he can be a star in his own right. So I wish that he didn't come off that 6 scratch, but in order to catch her, it was a conservative drive, 2 starts back, that second leg of the New Jersey Sire Stakes. Raced him from off the pace, had a good draw to work with, and Oka decided, I'm going to chase tonight, right? Just fell short, ran at a racetrack. In that final with the rail, he kind of had no choice but to get away where he did. Didn't want to kind of push him off the gate too hard, but he still had to push out in 27 and 4. But boy, that was a really good effort, wasn't it, Mike? And we haven't even touched on the breeding. Just really fascinating breeding. A son of Six Pack out of Sun Beach somewhere mare. And this guy's already made more money than any of the foals that the mares produced already. And I believe has gone the fastest time. So just remarkable stuff. Not something that you see very often, but there's so much to be intrigued with this guy for a variety of reasons. But he's definitely showed that he's got a lot of talent to back it up on the racetrack.
Well, a couple locals here to challenge. The most notable being You Got It Kemp, 2 straight wins. Was able to bag that mid-season final for Ontario Sire Stakes. Another one that comes off the pace. Another one that maybe is a little better than most people think. I mean, it was nearly 8-1 in that race.
Yeah, he gets you know what, though? He was an overlay on that night. I remember working the broadcast, and I think I did like Chicago Hall on top. But I remember saying to Randy, I said, if there's a horse that's an overlay in here, it's You Got It Kemp, a horse who came off a gold victory the start prior. And he was on the board at 12-1 at the time I said that. And he's got a pretty quick turn of foot. The wins aren't by a big margin, but you could see he got out late in the pocket, 2 starts back, and he was able to get into gear pretty quickly. And then he was able to tear off cover last time out. And he really showed a quick turn of foot when Sylvan was able to show him racetrack. So, again, this is a huge step up, right? But so far, great bang for their buck, $12,000 yearling purchase out of Harrisburg, Mike. And he's really fit here in the provincial program, but this is a step up in class here. I don't know if they can handle some of the other rivals in here, but he's got a great draw to work with. One that I do want to touch on quickly, Civilian Drone. I didn't love what I saw in that New York Sire Stakes leg on July 25th at Yonkers. He was getting a little leg weary late, especially off pretty favorable fractions. You watch that start in that kindergarten, though. He left out aggressively, got in a good spot, and Yannick decided to sit in instead of going first up. He was absolutely locked and loaded with some trot. I know the pace was slow and a bit of a question mark. I don't know if he's deep enough per se, but definitely one that I'm interested to see how he's going to race off a helmet. We've seen him on the lead a couple times, and we have seen him race off the pace, but on a big track, I think that's going to be his style. And you touched on elimination racing. Maybe he finds his way on the lead early on in the mile, and it's just kind of a single file merry-go-round, and top 5 make it. He's going to have to outsprint some pretty talented ones, but he's one that I think warrants a little bit of respect and has a little bit of intrigue here.
Well, lots of great racing Saturday night at Mohawk. Remember, 100,000 guaranteed pick 5 starting in race number 1. We have the eliminations for the Peaceful Way, the eliminations for the William Wellwood. So lots of intriguing racing for Saturday night at Mohawk. Well, we have another guest for the Harness Players podcast, and he's never at a loss for words. Oh, there he is. We're going to unmute him. Mr. Ray Cotolo. I don't know if this is a mistake or not. He muted himself. Unmute yourself, Ray, and jump into the show.
I'm not lost for words, but I definitely was in need of water when you were introducing me. I was getting a nice, healthy sip for the soul. I'll drink one for you too, John. You look a little parched, especially.
Yeah, you're like me. You needed to rush on before you. At least you made it back in time with the water. I played it a little bit close to the vest.
I made it back in time with the water, but unfortunately, I did not make it back in time for other things, which no one has to know about. We can get started on, what was it, Pocono?
Pocono, Sun Stakes day, actually. They're starting.
The sun famously out during the day.
Yeah, so they start at 2:30 Eastern on Saturday. Lots of big races, lots of consolations, and huge purses. Pretty much every race. We're just going to cover the finals for this podcast. We're going to cover races 10, 11, 12, 13. And we have lots of 3-year-olds in action going for big pots. We're going to start race number 10. James M. Lynch Memorial, 3-year-old fillies on the pace. A lot of the usual suspects here, Ray. Rocket Deo, Odds on Platinum, Caviar Bell, My Girl EJ. Who do you like here going to the 5/8 at Pocono?
What's especially interesting about this race, and I feel like we all can agree on this, is that on the Grand Circuit, this is probably the first meeting of all the division leaders. You know, we have Rocket Deo, who's starting to show herself to be someone interesting. My girl EJ back in against Caviar Bell. They seem to have been going down opposite paths, or at least different paths, until coming back into this race. And so that in my mind is what makes it an especially good betting race, because you're getting all of these horses that are very clearly good. Some of them kind of off their step, off their game. Like I don't know what happened to Caviar Bell on Hambletonian Day, for instance, but when she's the Caviar Bell that she usually is, she's firing home much more fiercely than just a 27 and change final quarter from a trip like that. So you have her coming into this race, maybe giving a bit of a premium because of that poor effort. You have Rocket Deo, who gets a great draw. She's coming in off a solid win. She can take a step forward. The only thing I don't like is that the secret's out. John and I had a never-ending argument about whether or not she was a good price on Hambletonian Day. And like many arguments, it turned out we were both correct. But I don't think you're going to get the price she was on Hambletonian Day inside of this race. So I feel like she's probably a play against, just because it's especially tough. And we're going to talk about this with some of the other races too later on. Projecting how the money is going to go is crazy because, as you said, Mike, the fields are stacked. There are horses that are really good that have unfavorable draws over the Pocono track. So you do have to wonder how that's going to impact the money that gets played on them. And so this is definitely this is a good race to kick it off, I feel like, in terms of the big stakes, because my girl EJ, I don't think she's 9-2 inside of this race. Caviar Bell, I don't know. The only thing I do know at this time is that Pass Line probably is going to be an okay price. We know that she's better than she was in the Jerry Silverman Memorial back on Meadowlands Pace Night. She went to the lead. She folded. She's coming in off a decent rebound runner-up finish to her stablemate. It's a Love Thing. And honestly, if you get 12-1 on the morning line, that's going to be astounding. She does seem like one that could get lost in the weeds of all the other big names that have black type victories already so far this season. And so that's the only thing I can look at this point. I could feel Pass Line is probably going to be an overlay inside of this race.
John, I'm looking at Odds on Platinum because I think that's the horse that gets lost in the race a little bit, because I think Rocket Dale takes money, Caviar Bell takes money. My girl EJ certainly will not be 9-2 in the race. You're familiar with this one, obviously. Probably maybe the third best 3-year-old filly pacer in Canada, but I do think she's getting better. She's getting faster. I think the small track suits. What say you on that one?
I think she's probably the second best 3-year-old pacing filly in Canada right now. I don't think Pass Line's kind of shown that early on in her career. And Odds on Platinum, she was always a filly who was around during her freshman campaign. Never could win. She would always, struggle to get her nose on the line first, but look at all those Grand Circuit races that she participated in last year, and she definitely held her own, was hitting the board consistently. One you couldn't leave off the ticket. My only problem with her, Mike, is that was a big mile in the Courageous Lady. She really stood out. She got the job done as the overwhelming favorite, but there could be a lot of speed in this race, a lot, especially by virtue of where some of these fillies draw. I love the way Rocket Deo raced the last couple starts. I thought the drive won the race last time out at the Meadows in that Pennsylvania Sire Stakes event. She definitely proved she was the best in that field, despite winning by a head. That was a tough mile. She had no business finishing up, as strong as she did. She still had a lot of fight towards the wire, but my girl EJ is gonna have to leave hard out of there. I think last time out she kind of faltered a little bit, though, right? I think that she let Rocket Dale get a little bit away from her, right? I think she kind of underestimated just how strong of a filly she is. I think Dex just figured that I've got all the talent in the world. I should be able to get her turning for home, but that wasn't the case. So I think you want to go with the closer here. I don't know if my girl EJ is going to want the lead now. I think that we know that she's pretty versatile. We know she can do it both ways. I don't know if she's going to be favored in this race. I would imagine there's a good chance she will be between her or Caviar Bell, but I think that this is a good bounce back spot for my girl EJ. But I will say, as a price, I do think Sweet Gal is definitely one that you want to consider from the rail. She could really get a stalking trip here.
You don't think Rocket Deo's the favorite inside of this race?
She will be.
If she is, that's even. I mean, she's great, but I want no part of her. I want no. This is a tough race, like you mentioned. To be honest, if she is, then there's even more reason not to want any part of her. And she's raced really well at Pocono, but as the favorite here in a wide open race, you have to look for some sort of value. And I think value is going to be. It's going to be perceived a little bit differently because I think 3-1 on specific fillies in this race. If you do get that, I do think that's value based on talent alone at this level.
Yeah, this is a race you definitely are going to have to be on your feet watching the board. I don't know if there are will pays going into a race like this to help you kind of figure out where money might be flowing, because this is one where you're definitely on the offensive of trying to see where the discrepancy is, where the inefficiency is on the board. Because with a field as good as this, and I know it's a good field because when you look at the broodmares and you can on at least over half of them go, oh my God, I know this horse, you know that it's probably a good race. And so that's at least what I feel. You got to try and look at where they are missing, and that means not probably making a bet until like a minute before they're going.
Kickstart's one of the pick 4 sequences there, so no multis closing there. You're gonna have to just kind of watch the board and watch some of those exacta probables. But even then, with the pool, it really depends on sometimes at Pocono, kind of trying to assess the exacta payouts because they fluctuate so quickly. So
my thoughts, a couple things. Caveat Bell is we talked about on the podcast for Hamiltonian night as a Meadowlands lover, and she just was stone cold flat off a perfect trip. I mean, really just went nowhere in the stretch. I'm not sure what happened there. Maybe she was sick. Maybe something was amiss. I don't know. I'm not sure that I want her though off that line. And I do think Rocket Deo's a little bit souped up. And Micro EJ that got a perfect trip in the Audio Volo. I mean, really, that race got set up for her by a wicked pace, 53-4. Now, she's probably, I think, the most classiest of these, but the post isn't in her favor here. So I think John's right. I think she has to be from off the pace. So I think it's a tough race. I like odds on Platinum just because I think she's getting better. I love that line two back whenever she beat the Barn Dogs Watching. That was no joke there. Really, that's an overnight race. She has lots of bigger fish to fry, and all of a sudden, she's winning that race, and then shows up and rips their faces off at Northfield. I like her in here. I like the way she's drawn. I think she can win with several different trips. I think there's plenty of speed that she can handle here. Even, so she feels like the one to make the first move to me, and they won't catch her. And maybe she's a good enough price that, it's worth a win bet for sure. She's a definite use for me in multis and all spots. I really like her in this race. And John, also you mentioned closers. If you want a closer, I mean, who's a better closer in the race than the 8? Can I get a Loop Loop who has a wicked kick, is always around it, seconds, thirds, has made a lot of money as a sort of a one-run type closer.
Yeah, but I still think that she probably should have got the job done against
Rocket Deo.
Yeah, Rocket Deo on Hambo Day. That's, I think for me, that's I know the pace was hot.
You guys liked Rocket Deo in that race.
No, we did.
It was a crawl to the finish, though. Like, if you're in the pocket in a 28 and change final quarter or somewhere in that ballpark against a group like that, you should have a bit more fight. Rocket Deo very clearly was the better horse.
And I love Can I Get a Loop Loop? I had a tough time kind of going between Rocket Deo and Can I Get a Loop Loop, because if you watch Can I Get a Loop Loop's races, they've been great. You mentioned the Adio Volo. I liked her in that spot. I took a shot with her in that spot, Mike, because of the price and how good she raced a few back over at the Meadowlands. But sometimes she just kind of takes a little bit of time to get going. You watch some of those stretch drives at the Meadowlands, she'll come pretty hard late, but sometimes just takes her a little bit of time to get going. I think on a shorter stretch, it takes her a little bit of time to kick it into gear. But she's a great closer, but from Pole State, I think that she's going to be really, really up against it here. She's one that I think is going to be a little bit too far out of the action.
Final note on this race, since we're talking about Hambo Day and it's giving me all these flashbacks, if anything, it caters to my girl EJ being a better bet inside of this race, especially if she gets lost on the board, just because you watch on Hambo Day when everyone's energy was up, when all the drivers were really on their toes. Who was the one guy that was crushing them all? The guy who stayed cold, who was methodical, who got them into the right places. It was Dexter. And this is a key example of a race where a lot of these guys have many different decisions they can make. There are certain ones like, Yannick's going to try and trip Caviar Bell out, but otherwise you have a bunch of guys who want to try and go forward. Dexter has that versatility at his disposal, and every time he goes onto the track and drives a race, we see that versatility and that ability to adapt in his strategy is probably his strongest asset. So that's another case to maybe especially watch the price on My Girl EJ. Say, like, if she's somehow 3-1, 7-2 inside of this race just because of the draw, you might be able to better justify taking her at as short a price as that, just given the variability of the competition in this field.
Yeah, and you know what, though, Ray, one last thing. I always try to play against Caviar Bell, but again, she's not as bad of a filly. Let's not be stubborn in saying that she's not as bad as a filly as we saw in Hambo Day. We know she's a lot better than what she showed. She came up, I might have liked different fillies in that spot, and for me, she was a complete toss or play against, just because I preferred I think other fillies are equally as talented from a talent perspective, but the way the race set up, she was going to be a main factor if she fired. She did not fire whatsoever. So I think that you might get an elevated price. Not one that I'll probably go to in this spot. But
I think she's better going on a 2-turn track, though. I feel like 3 turns is probably too short for her. She'll love the Red Mile.
But again, not one that you kind of want to dismiss entirely. Again, it's tough because you want to try and take a stand on a couple. I like that Mike is taking a stand on a horse who's going to be a pretty good price here, but it's just so tough. I really don't want to be the guy to say watch the board, but I think in a race like this, you really have to, just because they're pretty equal. Some of these fillies are pretty equal in talent. And again, My Girl EJ drawing the outside, that really changes the complexion of the race. So if she's a pretty good price, I'll take a stab on her.
Could also pull the Pete Klein hands and go, I abstain.
No, that doesn't happen here. That doesn't happen here.
Not with these three. 11th race, Del Monica Hanover 3-year-old filly trotters. We have lots of big names in here. Alyssa Hanover coming off her Hambo, basically did not fire performance. We have Warwick Michelle, who won that Hambletonian Oaks, but she's drawn outside in the 8-hole by a round. Second in that Hambo Oaks, gets first-time Lasix. Ray, where are you going?
This is just yet another race. You want to go from trying to figure out how the money is going to go inside of the James Lynch. You go to the Delmonica Hanover, where you have the Hambo Oaks winner, the winner of a very clearly key race, getting the worst possible draw she could get. I don't know what that means. Like, we know that a guy like Ock, he's not afraid if he has to be a bit aggressive to try and send him forward. She might be able to go forward against a group like this, because there's not really that much gate speed. Like, St. Pauli Girl has some speed. I was surprised Draw the Line did not fire on Hambo Day. I thought Yannick was going to blast her forward, and the fact that she got away 7th to the quarter, that makes me like her even less inside of a spot like this, where if you can just leave and get a good spot, you're probably going to get a decent check inside of this race. And so, I mean, the only other threat to her probably is her stablemate, French Champagne, who also has the speed to go forward and has a much better draw to do so. And I feel like she probably was going to do okay if she didn't get caught inside of that Date Night Hanover hookup. No pun intended in that, in the Hambo Oaks final. And on top of that, when you have trip trouble like that with French Champagne, to make the betting of this race even more confusing to understand, everyone else saw that, and you don't know how they're going to incorporate that into, their opinions and where they're going to place their money into a spot like this, especially since French Champagne has the clear draw advantage on Warwick Michelle. And you even watch the replay, you could maybe argue Warwick Michelle got lucky, got benefited by that traffic confusion happening behind her. By a round wasn't going to get to her, but some of the other horses coming up might have been threatening.
Date Night Hanover was winning that race.
If you want me to be on record, I will say Date Night Hanover was going to win the Oaks too.
She was going to let's not even be coy about it. She was absolutely going to jog. And if we needed any other reassurance, just go back and watch her race at the Red Mile most recently. You got 6-5, and Dexter came first up and absolutely drew away from Allegiance. So Date Night Hanover was getting there 100%.
But John,
let's talk about this race. How about this race? Okay,
John,
I don't care what happened 2 weeks ago.
John,
it's still relevant to this race. It's
John,
still relevant.
and No, John's bringing it up too because I have to issue an apology to Jeff Snyder and Marcus Melander and the connections at Date Night Hanover because I liked her inside of that race. That was the kiss
And
of
that was
death.
the problem. Yeah,
That
it
was
wasn't
the
the
kiss
fact
of
that she
death.
hooked wheels. It was the Ray Cotolo curse.
I talked to Jeff after he bought the horse at Harrisburg, and I saw his smile. I saw all of the joy, and I feel terrible that I'm responsible for that. But that aside, ultimately, I feel like French Champagne, if she doesn't take like a whole lot of action, if she's somewhere around like 3-1, 7-2, that's a justifiable price. Is it a realistic price? I don't really know inside of a spot like this where she's higher than that. Who are they going to bet? You think they're going to bet Alista? Because Alista's the only other horse they can bet inside of this race.
Well, hold on. You're talking about horses that if people are gonna bet off of last week's. Everybody saw last week. Didn't everybody see what Buy Around did last week too? Of course, she's gonna take support. I will say
I want nothing to do with her on this track, though.
You know what? Well, she's adding Lasix, and I think that's a different wrinkle too. I think that's very interesting to note that we're seeing.
Noel's doing that with Albano, though,
and he's doing that with Albano as well. So that's a very interesting. I will say though, for me, it's like I know that a lot of people are playing against Elisa. I think they had every reason to play against Elisa, not because of her lack of talent level. I think that was a race. The way the race was going to set up, I think we all knew that it was going to set up for a closer. I had to make my pick so early in the week. And after I submitted my selections, I remember I turned to my dad and I said, if I could do one do-over, it would be the Oaks. And just because of how good Michelle was, and I figured Buy Around would be a good wager, which they both were. They proved to be the case, finishing 1 and 2. But only thing I'll say, I don't want to just discount Elisa Hanover right away. I don't think I can't say she lost absolutely fair and square because she was completely flat. That's not the filly that we know she's.
And the track was off too.
Yeah, so I don't want to. I was curious, interesting to see if she would show up on Lasix here just because of how bad of an effort that was. Obviously, I'd love to go and catch up with trainer Andy Stobie and find out maybe what took place or if she had any idea maybe what took place. I really don't know, but we know that she's had a lot of success at Pocono, though, Ray, a lot. I know the competition was more inferior in those races, but she gets around this racetrack really, really well. It's one of those things where, hey, let's get some value back. After she took a lot of support there in the Ham Oaks, and she dressed pretty well here. Where's Buy Around gonna? She's been great, but where's Buy Around gonna get away from the rail though? Like
and on top of that, you're not going to gain that much ground or close that much ground on Pocono unless they go to 3/4 in like 22. And I'm not even against Elisa Hanover winning this race, but also when you win 11 races in a row, and then you lose in a race that very reasonably was going to be a tough ask. I still feel like the bandwagon is rolling. I don't think anyone is hopping off the ship. And she gets a much better draw than many of the other horses inside of this race. I feel like she's an underlay.
Now, one thing I will say, though, is that I think even I've spoken to Andy, and I can't remember if he's mentioned it.
You said Andy?
Andy McCarthy.
Okay.
Andy McCarthy. And I can't remember if he's mentioned it in an interview with me. It might have been on one of those paddock interviews. But he did say, I've got to get this filly a little bit closer. I've got to kind of take the training wheels off a little bit because she was a victim of trip every single week. We know that she can float out of there and leave. He's done that a couple times. And with her, she's just such a professional too. Again, Noel's kind of referenced her like a thoroughbred. She can miss a month's time and come back. She's not high maintenance, doesn't need to be trained hard. She can come back and put forth some pretty good efforts. I do think that, even with the rail, I do think that there's a good shot she could get away pretty well. Who's going to lead from the outside, though, realistically? Like the rail sometimes can be a tricky spot, though, but who's going to lead from the outside? We know French Champagne's leaving. Elisa won't necessarily leave hard out of there, right? She might get away third or fourth, but like who's going to lead those? Kinesiology draw the line. St. Pauli Girl was so good coming off the pace and defeat to slip sliding away, but I think that she's obviously a notch below. I think that's going to really help Buy Around secure a pretty good spot off the gate. And if LASIK, adding LASIK is an interesting wrinkle. She's racing well without it. If there was something even the slightest that was hindering her, isn't that going to help though, Ray? And doesn't that make her even more dangerous in this spot off that most recent performance?
I mean, possibly. The main issue though that you're raising is even if there is no speed leaving the gate, there is one person who is going to capitalize if there is no speed leaving the gate. And he is the guy who won the Hambletonian Oaks, who has a horse who very clearly, if she goes forward, she's going to keep rolling. And that's the issue, is that if you're taking a short price on Buy Around, who already has this uphill battle ahead of her from this pylon draw and needing this race to be her workshop, if she's having to make up 2-3 lengths on a horse that's going to get an easy lead, who very easily can just keep rolling and sustain her speed on the lead, it doesn't matter how good of a closer you are. Buy Around is one of the best closers inside of the race. I'll give her that. But looking at how this race is going to be bet and how she's most logically going to have to take money inside of this race, I can't imagine what price she's going to be. And I can't even feel like she's going to be in a ballpark that would entice me. I would need like 5-6 to 1 on her inside of this race. And when you're runner up in the Hambletonian Oaks, you're probably 5-2, 2-1 in the next race you're in, especially if you have a quote unquote better draw than the horse who won the race. Because we just, when you're at the pylons, you just go, well, you have an easier time getting to the pylons. Even though it has its disadvantages, it has its advantages as well. This is an incredibly tough race. I ultimately feel that if somehow French Champagne does not take exorbitant action based off of the traffic trouble, she's the logical bet inside of this race. And she more realistically could be 9-2, 5-1 inside of this race if they're betting Elise de Hanover like I think they will. If they're betting Warwi Michelle like I think they will. But it could also be a very even 4 horses getting bet, because I think we all agree St. Pauli Girl, Draw the Line, Eloise, maybe they stand a chance, but they're all outsiders. They're all somewhere in double-digit land. And that then brings a lot of points to the main horses that are going to take money, which is going to drive them all down. It's a tough race to forecast.
Couple things. Rain in the forecast this weekend at Pocono.
Mm-hmm.
So that makes it interesting also, especially for Alista, who apparently didn't like that sloppy track. And just like Thomas says, Thomas Svensson, who's a regular on these podcasts, he said that the best driver on 5/8 mile track is who? As Aki. As Aki, for sure. Yeah, and like people, in Sweden, he was the best on the 5/8, and I think he, especially in this outside post, he's going to be blasting Warren Michelle, brimming with confidence, coming off that Oaks win. No reason not to go forward here from this post, especially with some of these horses inside of her, and she's going to get some respect. So, and with the post, I could see, now obviously you're not going to get 13-1 again. I mean, that's gone, but yeah. I could see her being 3-1 in the race, especially if Alista takes the money that I think she'll take. And I think French Champagne will take money. I think the Buy Around definitely takes money in the race. So I think 3-1's fair.
No, and that's ultimately the tough thing, is especially with how the pools are at Pocono and such like that on a day like this, where, you're going to have more eyes, you're going to have more attention and stuff like that. This is another race where you're going to have to be watching the board carefully and accordingly, because it just takes one guy with a really strong opinion to make one of these horses a massive favorite. And you don't know how they're going to bet it. You don't know who they're going to take. You can assume that maybe Elise de Hanover has that favor in her favor, for lack of a better term, or Warwi Michelle, just off of the momentum of winning in the Hambletonian Oaks. They're the most logical ones to take those big plunges. And so then that there opens the door for Buy Around, but I don't think she's going to be in the ballpark for me. It's another and I think another testament to just how good of a card of racing this is, and of stakes these are, because there is no clear-cut horse. Even in the next one we're going to talk about, the Max Hempt, there may be a clear-cut horse, but with how the draw worked out, I think that's a level race. But
this is a good race for John to talk about, the 12th race, and it's the Max C. Hempt Memorial 3-year-old Open on the pace. John, legendary Hanover, likely going to be sub-even money versus these after those two monster races in the pace and then in the cane pace.
Yeah, should we even be really concerned about the draw, though? The race, I'm only saying that because how about the air that he took in the Meadowlands Pace final, and early on in that mile when they were going to a half and 53 and 2 and able to draw away, and then he's able to do things his own way on Meadowlands on Hambletonian Day and pace a mile in 46 and 2. I think that I said it on the broadcast. I think we're seeing a horse now that's kind of separating himself from the division right now. He had all the makings and the talent to be a superstar colt, and now we're starting to see it. Listen, my opinion of him has fluctuated kind of all over the place, though, because even though he went first up in that North America Cup, I still thought we should have seen more from him. And I say that because I hold some of these horses and some of these colts to such high standards when they've got the ability that Legendary Hanover has shown. But for me, I just thought that even though he looked a horse like Captain's Quarters in the eye, despite some of those quick panels, I didn't think it was a great fifth. But a lot of people say, he finished where he should have finished, being parked as long as he did. But now we're seeing him.
Another Ray Cotolo pick, by the way, in the North America Cup. I was on Legendary too. I'm a kid. I'm awful.
Well, but like even now, look at Captain's Quarters. Even in that Cane Pace, they weren't in the same league, right?
Mm-hmm.
Things didn't work out. Obviously, the Meadowlands Pace, the draws didn't set up to make it an even affair in that final. But I mean, he followed in the 2-hole Captain's Quarters on some pretty quick panels, and he kind of he tired out to finish third. Mirage Hanover was able to pick him off late, so I think that I'm intrigued now with Albano adding Lasix. I think obviously now we're seeing a driver change on Captain's Quarters. Is that going to make him drop 2 seconds? I really don't think so. I don't think it really matters here with the Legendary Hanover. I honestly think that he's starting to draw away from this group.
Here's my conundrum with that, though. Here's my conundrum with that, though, John. On Hambletonian Day, I felt the same way about Caviar Bell. I felt the same way about a Bucket Bet Hanover. And I feel like everyone here agrees they're good horses. And they still lost, didn't fire. You got to wonder at a certain point, when you go back-to-back unprecedented miles for a sophomore pacing colt, if the chugga can still choo-choo, or if it's going to lose a little bit of a step here or there, especially since he's moving from a 2-turn track to a 5/8 track.
How much more did he look like he had left in the tank, though? Did he not look like he had a lot left more to offer? I don't think James was going out there, despite that 46-2 mile, trying to break any records. James knows that there's a long year ahead. I think he was just going as far as there was a lot left. I'm
not in disagreement about that, and I feel the same way. But it's ultimately just tough, because even when you have these really good horses, and they're managed well, and they have everything taken care of, they're avoiding the seasonal allergies and all the other things that can make them lose 1/5 of a second, 2/5 of a second, all those things that determine hundreds of thousands of dollars. There are still so many factors in play where you just wonder, what is he going to do? Like, we trudged on this a bit with Bulldog Hanover, but what was interesting is that with Bulldog Hanover, there was like this weird qualitative element to it where we all accepted that he's probably just going to keep going. He didn't really seem like he had that much of a stop to him. I don't have that feeling with Legendary Hanover, and especially when you're looking at a young horse. When there's an older horse, I think you're more inclined to feel that they can keep progressing and developing because there's a bit more of a foundation under them. This guy's had 17 starts, and he's going balls to the walls pretty much every single time.
But who's going to realistically, like, I don't know if Mike wants to chime in on who he thinks can realistically, like, beat this colt. Like Captain Albano, that he was supposed to win the Adios, wasn't he? And he just hung on by a neck. And yeah, it was a quick mile early on in the mile, but we've seen some quick miles from Legendary, and he still looked very, very strong. So that's why I'm interested.
The thing you have to remember with Albano, and especially since he's adding Lasix, what was the one caveat with him last year that everyone had in terms of when he's coming into the race? What is the one factor that's going to determine how Albano's going to do? The answer, does anyone remember? No one remembers? He was a pocket horse. Almost every race he won, he was sitting in the pocket. He was chasing. And so when he performs in the Adios the way he did, where he gets hit by a wall like Wish You Well, blasting at him late, and the line coming in time, I would agree. I'm not surprised that the margin was so narrow. And similarly, when we look back to how he's raced this season, what was one of his best races of the year? Granted, there are other variables in terms of management, scheduling, torquing, all these other types of things. He got a pocket ride in the North America Cup, and he looked like he wanted to break horses' backs. He wanted to chomp them up, spit them out, eat them again. And he finished 4th off of that trip because he didn't get any kind of room. So I'm kind of curious, not only with the Lasix element in play, but also in a race like this, where very clearly there are tougher horses in against Captain Albano, he might have a better time securing a type of trip where he's going to have the wind cut for him. He's going to save ground. And then maybe he has a bit more to muster. especially adding the rain into the forecast as well. Pocono is a weird track when it gets wet. It doesn't really speed up like Meadowlands and such. I feel it slows down in certain ways, especially in that final quarter. And so that maybe gets in the way of a horse like Legendary Hanover. It could maybe be the testament. It could be the little piece of fruit on top of the cake for Legendary Hanover that says to you, he is a great horse. He is, in fact, Legendary Hanover. But what is he going to be in this race? He's going to be 4 to 5.
Well,
he's going to be 4 to 5 from a tough draw.
He'll be 1 to 5.
And even worse. Here's
the thing, though. What if he's a Meadowlands lover? That's what I want to know. He went to the Meadowlands and he just turned into a different horse. Now he gets the 5/8. Well, look what happened to Sylvia Hanover last year whenever she was shipped to Pocono. What happened to her, Ray?
She broke stride. I believe that was also her only race on a 5/8.
She looked very dominant prior to that point, jumped on Pocono and found a way to bust and lose the race. I mean, I just think that this is a perfect spot to take a shot against Legendary, and he might prove to be the best horse overall of these horses, but this is a totally different thing here, shipping to Pocono in this race. There's other horses in this race that have excelled on 5/8 mile tracks. That might not have his talent, but this is a whole new kettle of fish for him, and he's outside. They're not going to give it to him. I like others inside. I think I like Captain's Quarters getting Scott Zeron in the race. I think that's an interesting caveat, and he's gone head to head with Legendary in the past. So, maybe he's getting healthier right now. He was third in the cane, but I do think 5/8 could be okay for him as tactical as he is. I like Wish You Well. I don't have a problem with him and his newly found kick, and he likes the smaller track. I know that he didn't win the most, but he probably could have won the Audios, and he was wicked in the elimination with that 25-2 kick. You never see anything close to that at the Meadows. So, he draws perfect. He's going to get lost on the board, and Albano could set it up for him. He adds Lasix. He's racing much better since getting to the smaller tracks. No, he can't hang with Legendary on the big track. I don't think anybody can hang with Legendary over the Meadowlands. I just don't think that's possible. I think that he's a monster over that racetrack. Let's see what he can do on Saturday on this 5/8. At a micro price. I mean, I think that this is a race you want to spread out and see if you can beat this horse up.
And I especially, you're going to get a good price on Captain's Quarters inside of this race too, especially if Legendary's 1 to 5.
Yeah, I just don't know if Zeron's going to be able to tick off a couple seconds on Captain's Quarters. I think that Jody's given him.
How many seconds does he have to tick off?
Well, I think this is real. This is a really interesting.
This is a trip race. This isn't a speed race.
Well, he got the trip against Legendary, and he tired. I just don't know what kind of. I think he's going to need to show a lot more here.
Situation. It's totally different situation, for Legendary, and he might pass the test, and he might prove that he's taken that step forward, and that he's just going to cruise the rest of the year and crush them all the whole way around.
I also feel, even though he was in the pocket to Legendary, when you start hitting 3/4 and 19 and change, you have to start throwing some rules out the window. You're heading into territories where even like the most sturdy of the greatest horses we can think of aren't necessarily proven. And you just don't know how certain horses react to going that amount of speed. What I do know is the likelihood of them going that type of speed in this race is next to nil. And if that's the case, that probably better suits a horse like Captain's Quarters, where you look to some of his best races this year. It was in that North America Cup when he was going down the road, had no one looking him in the eyes except for one horse, and it just happened to be one who's great off a helmet, who had the energy from the trip to just surge by. And even then, it was just about like a length that Captain's Quarters lost the cup.
I think that we could talk about this race all night, but maybe let's move on.
One last. Like I said, I just think that Captain Albano's my wild card. I want to see how he can elevate his.
Is he the second choice though?
No,
Captain's Quarters is the second choice in that race. I think
we'll see.
I'm not saying just from a betting. I just kind of want to see what kind of effort he puts forth. I'm really curious to see again when Noel Daly's bringing both horses in off good efforts and adding Lasix. I think that adds a different wrinkle to things. Maybe there's something there that we don't know about, and we've seen some horses, added and really, really start to do good things. But again, I think Legendary Hanover. I think he's going to keep proving that he's clearly the best colt in this division. But that's just my opinion.
Well, we'll finish up 13th race, Earl Beal Jr. Memorial 3-year-old Open Trotters And we got a few horses that were in that Hamiltonian. There's no Carl here. He was at the Red Mile this week, dominating again. But Sig Sauer, TCI, Amazing Catch, all show up here on the Hamiltonian. Situationship also. Ray, where are you at here?
I mean, this is again.
We must all be on the same horse, I think.
I don't know. I'm lukewarm as I am in many of the other races. I'm lukewarm in this one too, because I mean, as we all know, when you leave the Hamiltonian, that a lot of horses that their next start, they tend to do really well. It's one of the most obvious key races in the entire racing calendar. But I mean, I don't. TCI he's the most logical one to take money. I don't really know how he's going to take a step forward from. Granted, it was a tough race. He went fast fractions in the slop. He might have reasonably folded. They're still trying to fix him, I guess. He had tummy problems. I know I had tummy problems recently, and I'm only just getting better now. So maybe some gastric pressure on TCI is going to help him get across the line first inside of a race. But he's the 5-2 morning line favorite. I don't really know how to take Sig Sauer, because he is also incredibly obvious. I am admittedly elevating Amazing Catch, because I would have never had that horse finishing third in the Hamiltonian in 10 million, 20 million years. I might even say 30 million years. But he got third because Dexter Dunn saved ground. He read the race well. He got the trip, and then went inside a pylon, and then got so scared of going inside of one in the Oaks that he lost. But that's aside the point. The horses that are going to take money are incredibly obvious. No one needs us experts or even people who happen to have some idea of what's going on.
We would love an opinion at some point, like just any horse.
The only horse that might be an okay price is security protected. I am intrigued by the fact that he got a win off of that Hambo final, where very clearly he did not like the rain falling down. So he broke stride, was instantly out, got a perfect trip, admittedly, in that following start, romped in. I feel like he probably could have gone a little bit better since it was 28 and change. And, you do wonder, well, can he go a little bit faster home? He probably can. And he's done well over this Pocono track in the past.
He showed nothing against these types, though.
Nothing.
Absolutely nothing.
Sure, but I don't know. If Amazing Catch is the third choice in this race, you're telling me that he is a better bet than security protected?
Absolutely, because he's got a legitimate. Sure, he's got a legitimate shot. I don't think security protected does, in my opinion. I just don't think he's got a shot. I do think he's a better wager, because I think the horse has a chance to win. And the third choice,
he got a perfect trip and a perfect drive in the Hamiltonian, and you're willing to have his value get cut like tenfold in a race like this because he had that good finish.
I want no part of security protected here, Mike. Ray, I mean, Amazing Catch, I think, has the talent to at least be competitive in this group. But I think we can all agree on, if we're getting maybe second choice on Sig Sauer, I think just given the talent and his trip, I think that's the play. There's still a really high likelihood that TCI is going to be the favorite in this race, given the connections, given how much money the horse has earned, and given that we see a lot of ones on his lines, both at the start of the mile and the end of it too, right? So I think that he's still a horse I think is going to take a lot of support. And Sig Sauer, we all saw the replay. We don't need to really, dive too deep. He was locked in, he was loaded. And if he gets out sooner, he could be a big player in that race. Unfortunately, things didn't work out. And he's probably, especially in this group, he's the now horse. He's peaking at the right time. He's got another great draw to work with. I don't think that Andy's going to risk trying to get boxed in. I do think that he wants the horse he'd like to follow is TCI. I also think there's a good shot that maybe he wants to try and take matters into his own hands, given that he feels like he's got the best colt. And I think if you were to speak to Andy and Noel, I think they share that same sentiment.
No, and that's ultimately the tough thing is, well, for one, when he had that eye-catching mile beating Carl, he got elevated on a lot of people's radars reasonably because, he's Carl. And then in the Hambo elimination, he had a electric enough late kick that everyone was like, even Mike himself was like, this is the Hambo winner. I don't care about Carl. It's Sig Sauer. And with that trip in a race where John and I had, no joke, a 2.5 hour phone call trying to figure out, how does this race get bet? How does this race get bet? And I'm saying to John, you are mentally insane, as opposed to being physically insane, to make Sig Sauer 4-1 on the morning line inside of this race. Carl is easily
and
on.
Yet,
that's my point. And yet, and through all of that, he goes off 5-1. All of the eyes and attention on him in that race against Carl.
It's almost like I have a little bit of an idea.
How is he not the favorite inside of this race? Everyone saw the same.
He'll be the favorite in this race. He will be the favorite.
Is that worth it? The only way it's worth it. The only way it's worth it is if you just say, forget everything. I'm just singling him.
You're going to take security protected against him, though?
I'm offering in the same vein that pass line is going to be an overlay in the James Lynch. Security protected is going to be an overlay inside of here because everyone shares the same opinions as you two. And, I'm of the same thing. Over the bigger track, over the 2-turn ovals, he hasn't been able to gain ground, but they've been going faster over those tracks. And now you're going to a smaller track where security protected has done better. He's done much better over 3 turns than he has over 2 turns. I just feel that a lot of the negativity that's going towards him is going to drive his price up. And there might be room to make some money on that because Sig Sauer's obvious. He's going to be the favorite most likely.
An alternative to Sig Sauer, I could see situationship only because he's speedy. I think that the small track helps him. I think that Aki's going to be aggressive and he's going to, control the race. From the 6th post, I think he leaves out, especially with security protected inside him, who really doesn't have a whole lot of gate speed. I do think Sig Sauer goes forward. He went forward in the Hamiltonian.
I don't think security protected is going. I think Scott Zeron is going to look at that list up and down and analyze the race and say, yeah, I'm not going forward because I think the inside 4 are going to be pushing out for positioning. We know 6 Sauer is leaving. TCI is leaving. Amazing Catch is going to push out. You think Aaron Merriman from the rail is going to sit that one out and not try and push out? There's no shot Scott Zeron is leaving in this race, and that's even more reason not to want any part of already. I don't even think the horse is close enough to a talent level to some of these other trotters. I know that he was in the Hamiltonian final, but I think there are a couple of these other rivals have just they're just notches above him. I want no part in security protected. And Mike's right. If you want to take an alternative to the main rivals, situationship has at least shown that against these similar types that he's actually put forth winning efforts and good ones at that.
Security protected's kicked home in 27 and change over the Pocono Oval, but I mean, sure, he's impossible. There's no chance in hell that Scott
they haven't raced there. Those other horses haven't raced there, and I'm sure that they could do the same. It's not like something we haven't seen before, right? I'm approaching this objectively, not even subjectively. Objectively, security protected is going to be an overlay in this race because everyone hates him. Everyone thinks he's junk. And I'm simply saying he's not as bad as everyone's saying.
All right, so Saturday, we'll let Ray talk forever. Saturday, Pocono, Sun Stakes Day. Ray, give me a best bet. Give me something besides security protected.
So of the, I'd probably say best bet. I'd say best bet's French Champagne in the Delmonica Hanover. I do really think she's going to be an okay price inside of that race, and she's gonna race well. She looked like she was going to get a good piece of the Oaks, and barring anything dumb happening, she should be involved in the Delmonica.
John.
I'm going to probably look at some of those overnight races probably to try and find a best bet. I'm actually going to probably go to the one of the consolations. I think I'm going to take a shot with either a Sweet Beach here or I'm going to maybe look to Lulu, one of those horses. I haven't really decided yet, but I think one of those two, depending on the price, is going to be a pretty good play there. I'm probably leaning towards Lulu. Lulu's a filly, I think, peaking at the right time. 8-1 morning line. Don't think you'll get anywhere close from post 7, but I think she's a good play.
I'll try Odds on Platinum. I do like her quite a bit in race number 10, Saturday at Pocono. I just think that she can win off any trip, and she's probably going to end up in the right spot against some really nice horses, and it's going to be a good enough price to take a shot with. I think she's improving. I like her chances Saturday at Pocono in race number 10. All right, guys, final thoughts. We got Mohawk Eliminations this weekend. We got Pocono Sun Stakes Day. Ray, in less than 30 seconds, let's wrap it up.
Yeah. I'll be watching the Peaceful Way of Limbs. For the Peaceful Way of Limbs, but also I want to see John's pretty little face on that big screen that they got with all the cameras at Mohawk. But before that, I'm going to be watching Sun Stakes, and this card's been happening for a long time now. They've changed dates and stuff like that, but I do feel like this is one of the better years for that card. So I really hope that people are betting and the handle is good, because really they couldn't have done a better job getting the horses into these races and just for the timing to work. Where like I said, for the 3-year-old pacing fillies, this is the first time all year all of the big ones are coming together, and it's at Pocono on Saturday.
And they're all coming together at the right time too.
Exactly.
John, hopefully the weather holds up.
Yeah, I really hope so too. It's going to be, we touched on it on the Mohawk pod or the section of this pod, Mike. The driver changes on Saturday. It's going the driver changes. The drivers being at Pocono participating on that card, I think that it's going to be interesting to see if they do make it back. I was telling Mike Ray that the race office, they did push 4 out of those or 3 out of those eliminations to the later part of the card, in anticipation that some of these drivers might make it. It might be a tough time coming back. So that's something definitely to monitor. I'm sure that some of those guys are going to retain the drives in the event that they can't make it and they qualify for the final. But busy weekend at Mohawk, obviously, with the eliminations. 6 weeks of stakes action and even some out-of-town action, too. It's always fun to watch some of those races at the Red Mile all the time. We've seen another record-breaking mile, sipping on C-Rock, going that 48 and 2 miles. So, Bert's got a quartet of talented pacing quotes. And, again, tying into Mohawk and the stakes action, we're likely going to see maybe a couple of them over in Canada for the Metro. Although sipping on C-Rock and even Loose Print, not eligible for the Metro, but Swingtown is. So I think just the talent, the freshman talent that we've seen throughout the sport, I think that's something definitely worth keeping an eye on. We saw 2 fillies, Poppy Rob, what's the filly? I forget the name.
Poppy Grad.
Poppy Grad. She got it done earlier today, and we saw Chantilly while we were doing this pod just win an OSS Gold for 2-year-old pacing fillies. So much to be excited about in terms of rookies, but the focus will be on all the sophomores at Pocono come Saturday.
Swingtown, one of the rare Ray Cotolo picks that did not.
That was a nice pick. I remember that was a nice pick, Ray. Okay, this has been a production of In the Money Media. Thanks, guys, for watching. We'll be back next week. I don't know who will be here. Maybe Edison. I think everyone.
Is he still on the team?
Yeah. Wish him happy birthday. I know that he was watching Sweden the other day. So we appreciate you guys, and we'll see you next time.